My stepdaughter screamed, "You're nothing, and don't ever call yourself my father." That same day I froze all her cards, took back the laptop, and stopped paying for her education. She quickly realized her hero father wouldn't even pick up the phone. Hit subscribe, drop your own stories in the comments, and let's begin. My name is Michael, and I am 50 years old. For 16 years, I carried a family on my back that was never fully mine. I married Emily knowing she came with a daughter, Madison. A girl who, in theory, already had a father, but in practice lived like an orphan with a ghost for a parent. Christopher was his name. He existed in fragments, in filtered Instagram photos of fishing trips with buddies, in smiling selfies with new girlfriends, in texts that arrived like clockwork twice a year. "Merry Christmas, kiddo," or "Happy birthday, princess." Madison would sometimes show me her phone, laughing at the laziness of it, the coldness of it. She never said she was hurt, but I saw it. I saw the quiet in her eyes, the way she put the phone down too quickly, as if to hide disappointment before it could fully bloom. So I stepped in, not as a replacement, not as a rival, but as something solid. A man who woke up at 6 every morning to make sure she didn't oversleep. A man who sat in endless carpool lines, who clapped in gymnasiums that smelled of sweat and polish, who held her hand when fever wrung the color from her face. I was the one who argued with insurance companies when she needed medication. I was the one who signed the checks when tuition notices came in. And I never once said, "Call me Dad." I never demanded it. I told myself that love is proven in actions, not in titles. That if I was steady, if I was present, if I made every sacrifice without complaint, then maybe one day she would look at me and see more than just Emily's second husband. Maybe she would see the man who raised her. Years passed that way. I worked late nights and early mornings, the grind of a man who wanted to leave no gaps. I gave up vacations, sold the car I wanted, skipped replacing my own shoes more times than I can count. All so she could have what she needed. When she got into university, it was my account that bled for it. I bought her the laptop she tapped through her degree. I paid for the books stacked like bricks on her desk. Rent, groceries, the endless bills that came with a child turning into an adult. They fell on me. Christopher was nowhere. Emily saw it, and sometimes, in rare quiet moments, she thanked me with a squeeze of my hand or a look that said more than words could. But Madison grew accustomed to it, as children do. She took what I gave as if it had always been hers. And still, I told myself this was fatherhood. Not blood, not biology, but sacrifice. When she announced her engagement to a man named Ryan, I felt an odd mix of pride and dread. Pride because I had helped carry her to this milestone. Dread because I knew what would come next. Expenses endless and consuming. I was right. The engagement wasn't just an announcement. It was a bill. A venue in the suburbs of Chicago. Sprawling, decorated, costly. The gown she chose from a boutique, delicate lace that came with a price tag I had to swallow. Photographers, musicians, floral arrangements, towering cakes that tasted of sugar and debt. All of it ran through my cards. It was as though the wedding was less a celebration of love and more a measure of my capacity to give. Emily didn't argue. She simply said, "It's her big day, Michael." And I nodded, as I always did, because I wanted Madison to have a day that would never leave her memory. I wanted her to look back and know that someone had given her a gift her father never could. I told myself, this is what fathers do. They give, they pay. They step back into the shadows and let their children shine in the light. But there were shadows behind it all. Small things easy to dismiss yet corrosive over time. Madison never introduced me as her father. Only my mom's husband. At family gatherings, when relatives asked who was covering all these grand expenses, she'd laugh lightly and say, "Oh, we're figuring it out." As if the money materialized out of thin air. I was invisible in the narrative she told about her life, even as my hands built its foundation. Still, I pressed forward. Each check I signed, each payment I made, I told myself this was an investment in her happiness, in her future. That maybe on the day of her wedding, when she looked at me, she would finally acknowledge it. Maybe she would say, "You were the one who was there. You were the one who raised me." I clung to that hope the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I barely slept. My days blurred together: work, wedding planners, vendors, contracts. The house filled with swatches of fabric, color palettes, lists of guests whose names meant nothing to me. I signed invoices without even reading them, too weary to argue, too determined not to let money spoil her moment. One night, Emily asked me, "Are you sure we can afford all this?" I remember looking at her across the kitchen table, my fingers pressed into my temples, exhaustion weighing on me like an anchor. "We can't," I admitted, "but we'll find a way." She reached across, touched my hand, and whispered, "Thank you." It was enough to push me forward again. I should have seen it sooner. The small cracks, the way Madison looked at Christopher's occasional texts as though they carried more weight than years of my presence. The way she never asked about my day, never noticed when I worked late, never said thank you when another check cleared. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't malicious. She was indifferent. And indifference, when stretched over 16 years, becomes its own form of cruelty. But I silenced those thoughts. I told myself it will be worth it. The day will come and it will be beautiful. The sacrifice will finally mean something. The rehearsal dinner was meant to be the culmination of it all. The night when family and friends gathered before the final step, when laughter and speeches would seal everything I had built. I even bought her a gift for the occasion. A pendant with an engraving, something simple but personal. A reminder that I had always been there. I thought it would mean something. I thought in that moment she might see me. I was wrong. The rehearsal dinner should have been a celebration. A warm evening where laughter floated above clinking glasses, where families came together before the storm of the wedding day. Instead, it became the night everything broke. I remember the moment with perfect clarity, as though my memory refuses to blur it. I stood before Madison, pendant in hand. It wasn't extravagant, not compared to the gown or the venue or the towers of flowers waiting for her tomorrow. But it was mine. A small circle of silver, engraved with words chosen carefully. Words meant to remind her that no matter who failed her, I had stayed. She opened the box, glanced at it, and laughed. A sharp, careless laugh that echoed louder than it should have. She raised her voice so everyone could hear, so it could cut all the way through me. "You're nobody," she shouted. "And don't you ever call yourself my father." The room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. For a moment there was only silence. Heavy, suffocating silence, before a few nervous chuckles broke through, as if people wanted to believe it was just a joke. But it wasn't a joke. I knew it the moment her eyes met mine. Cold, dismissive, already turned away from me before the words had fully left her lips. It was a knife, and she twisted it in front of everyone I had been feeding, clothing, supporting for years. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. What words could I have found in that moment? Any defense would have sounded like begging, and I had already begged enough. Not with words, but with years of labor and sacrifice. So I said nothing. I sat back down. I forced food into my mouth that tasted like ash. I listened to the laughter resume, cautious at first, then swelling as if nothing had happened. And all the while, I felt something inside me calcify. The humiliation burned through me, but beneath it, colder than ice, there was clarity. She had spoken the truth she had always believed, that I was nothing. Not a father, not even a man worthy of acknowledgement. Just a wallet with legs. An ATM that smiled and asked for nothing in return. That night, I left early. No explanations. No goodbyes. I walked into the dark Chicago air, my chest hollow, my face stone. At home, I poured myself a drink and sat before my computer. The glow of the screen lit the room in blue as I opened every account, every portal, every automatic transfer that kept her world spinning. And one by one, I took it all back. The tuition payments canceled. The bank cards linked to my accounts drained and closed. The honeymoon car rental revoked. Even the laptop she used to finish her degree, the one I had chosen and paid for, sat on her desk upstairs. I went to her room and lifted it, feeling its weight in my hands, and carried it back into my study. I wasn't angry, not in the way most people imagine anger. Loud, explosive, destructive. No, my anger was quiet, precise. Each click of a mouse, each cancellation, each withdrawal was deliberate. I was not punishing her in rage. I was delivering justice. If I was nobody, then my money was going to be nothing to her as well. The house was silent as I worked, but inside me, a storm raged. 16 years replayed in fragments. Hospital nights where I held her hand. Mornings where I packed her lunch. Birthdays where I gave gifts she barely acknowledged. Bills paid without a thank you. I saw them all, strung together like beads on a thread that now snapped in my hands. By dawn, it was done. Madison's life, so carefully propped up on my shoulders, had been stripped back to its bones. She just didn't know it yet. I slept for an hour, maybe two, before the phone began to ring. Madison. Her name lit up the screen again and again. Dozens of calls. Dozens of voicemails I didn't answer. Her voice went from confusion to anger to desperation. I listened to none of it. She learned quickly. At the wedding venue, they told her the payments had been canceled. At the university, they confirmed tuition was frozen. The florist refused to deliver. Even the car rental for her honeymoon was revoked. Her carefully constructed world collapsed in less than a day, because the foundation had never been hers, it had been mine. And Christopher, the father she had elevated in words, the man she had chosen in blood, the ghost she thought she could lean on, he didn't answer her calls. Not one. The fantasy father vanished the moment responsibility knocked at his door. For the first time, she had to face reality. That her perfect father was only perfect because he cost nothing. Emily found me in the kitchen that morning, sitting at the table with my coffee. Her face was pale, her phone buzzing in her hand. She had heard the chaos, the fallout. She had heard her daughter screaming accusations, begging for help. And for the first time in 16 years, Emily didn't defend her. She was wrong, Emily whispered. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. Michael, she was wrong. You've been the only real parent she's ever had. Something in me broke at that. Not from pain, but from relief. For so long, I had carried this burden silently, wondering if anyone saw the truth. Now, at least Emily admitted it. But Madison didn't. Madison doubled down. She turned her fury on her mother, blaming her for siding with me. She threw Emily out of the wedding prep house, screamed that I had destroyed her happiness, ruined her big day. She never once said she was sorry, and so the wedding never happened. I watched it all unravel from a distance, calm, detached. For years, I had been entangled in her life, suffocating in her indifference, waiting for gratitude that never came. But that night, when she spat her truth in my face, I was freed. Because I realized something. I didn't lose a daughter that evening. I never had one. I only stopped feeding someone who saw me as nothing more than an open wallet. And the silence that followed was sweeter than any thank you she had never given me. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, the storm broke in full. My phone began ringing before the sun had risen. Madison's name flashing again and again, her voice spilling into voicemail with the desperation of someone watching her life burn to the ground. At first, I ignored it. I sat with my coffee, the bitter taste stronger than usual, and let her words fall unheard. But curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed play on one of her messages. Michael, what the hell is going on? The venue just called me. They said the payments were canceled. Tell me it's a mistake. Call me back, please. I listened to another. Don't do this. You can't do this. Everyone's arriving tomorrow. Do you understand? This is my wedding. Her voice cracked. I could hear tears in it, though they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of entitlement, of panic, of a child who realized the invisible net had been cut away. By noon, her anger replaced the pleading. You think you can control me with money? You think you can humiliate me like this? You're sick, Michael. Sick. I don't need you. I never needed you. You'll regret this. I put the phone down. The words didn't wound me. Not anymore. I had already heard the deepest cut the night before. Everything now was just the flailing of someone who realized her power over me was gone. At the venue, they told her the truth. Without payment, nothing moved forward. The deposit I had placed was already eaten by fees, and every vendor had been notified. Flowers were undelivered. The band was released. The photographer sent an apologetic email that the date could not be held. Even the car rental for her honeymoon, a sleek white convertible Ryan had been bragging about, was revoked. Her dream day crumbled in real time, and the one person she thought she could turn to, Christopher, was nowhere. She called him dozens of times, left voicemails that grew more frantic with each attempt, even messaged him publicly on social media. He didn't reply. He didn't even offer her the courtesy of rejection. He vanished like he always did. That was when the truth began to dawn on her. The man she had mocked me for not being, the real father she raised above me, wasn't coming to save her. Emily, meanwhile, had reached her limit. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she set her phone down. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Then say nothing," I answered. My voice was calm, not cruel. I was beyond cruelty. "Just watch." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "She doesn't understand, Michael. She doesn't know what she's done." "She knows exactly what she's done," I said. "She just never thought she'd pay for it." For the first time in years, Emily did not defend her. She did not excuse her behavior as youth, or stress, or immaturity. She admitted it. I had been the only real parent in Madison's life. But Madison wasn't ready to face that truth. Her fury only grew. She called her mother, screaming through the phone so loudly I could hear every word. "You took his side. Do you even care about me? He's destroyed everything. And you're just letting him." Emily tried to calm her, but Madison's voice was venom. "You're weak, both of you. You're pathetic." That night, Emily went to see her. She packed a small bag, hoping to spend the evening with her daughter, to soften the wound, to remind her that no matter what happened, she was loved. I told her not to go. "She'll throw it back in your face," I warned. Emily didn't listen. She went anyway. She came back 3 hours later, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She dropped the bag by the door and collapsed into a chair. "She threw me out," Emily whispered. Her voice was hollow, broken. "She said I was choosing you over her. She said I wasn't welcome at her wedding." I sat across from her in silence. What words could I offer? This was the consequence of raising a child to believe love was unconditional, even when it came without respect. The wedding never happened. Guests began arriving to find chaos. Some traveled across states, only to discover there was no venue, no ceremony, no celebration. Madison and Ryan tried to spin it, blaming unforeseen circumstances. But the whispers spread quickly. Everyone knew the truth. Money had been pulled, support had vanished, and the foundation had cracked. Madison's fury turned toward me, sharper than ever. She sent a letter a week later, pages filled with accusations. She wrote that I had humiliated her in front of everyone, that I had ruined the most important day of her life, that I had controlled her for years and then abandoned her when she needed me most. But in all those pages, not a single apology appeared. Not one acknowledgement of the words she had spoken at the rehearsal dinner. Not one admission of the truth she had revealed in front of everyone. Reading that letter, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just clarity. Because it was then I realized something final, something I should have seen 16 years ago. I had not lost a daughter. I never had one. I had been feeding someone else's child, carrying someone else's weight, pouring my life into a well that never once echoed back gratitude. I had been a man playing a role, a shadow standing in for a ghost who never intended to return. And when the curtain finally fell, I was left with nothing but the truth. Madison didn't see me as a father. She never had. I was a wallet, and wallets can be replaced. But the man who carried her all those years? He cannot, and she will never have him again. A week passed in silence before the letter arrived. Not a text, not a call, not a trembling voice begging forgiveness. A letter, thick with self-righteousness, written in her hand. I sat at the kitchen table when I opened it. Emily was upstairs, pretending not to wait, but I knew she was listening for the sound of paper tearing, listening for whatever judgment was about to be delivered. The letter began with fury. You humiliated me. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone. You destroyed the most important day of my life because you couldn't stand that you weren't the center of it. Each line dripped with accusation. She called me controlling, manipulative, cruel. She wrote that for years I had bought my way into her life, that I had forced myself into the role of a father she never asked for, that I had smothered her with obligations disguised as generosity. Not once did she mention the pendant. Not once did she recall her words at the rehearsal dinner. Not once did she acknowledge the truth that shattered 16 years of my life. There was no apology, no recognition of what she had said, what she had done. Only rage that the money had stopped, that the world she had built on my shoulders had crumbled when I stepped aside. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it, placed it back in the envelope and set it aside. I felt nothing. No anger. No grief. No temptation to forgive. Just clarity, the kind of clarity that arrives when the last illusion is stripped away. For 16 years, I had told myself I was building a family. I had believed that presence could replace blood, that sacrifice could buy respect, that years of steady labor could turn indifference into love. I had told myself that one day Madison would see the truth, that she would look back and realize who had raised her, who had carried her, who had given her the life she lived. That day never came, and now I knew it never would. Because Madison was not my daughter. She never had been. She was a girl who tolerated my presence because it benefited her, who leaned on my wallet while scorning the hand that held it, who looked past the man in front of her to chase the shadow of a father who existed only in photographs and holiday texts. I had not lost her. I had only stopped feeding her. Emily asked me that night if I regretted it. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes searching mine. 16 years, she whispered. Doesn't it hurt to see it end like this? I thought about it, truly thought, and then I shook my head. No, I said, because it never began. Emily flinched, but she didn't argue. She knew the truth. She had watched me carry Madison's life for 16 years. She had seen the exhaustion in my face, the quiet sacrifices I made. She had defended her daughter for years, excused her silence, dismissed her indifference. And now, when it all collapsed, even she couldn't deny the truth. Madison had never seen me as a father. She saw me as a man filling a void her real father left behind. Nothing more. The days that followed were quiet. Madison didn't call again. She didn't appear at our door. Words spread through the family. Whispers of the ruined wedding, the canceled payments, the fight that had destroyed everything. Some relatives called me cold. Others said I had gone too far. A few, in hushed tones, admitted they understood. But none of their opinions mattered. For the first time in 16 years, I felt free. I stopped checking my phone for her name. I stopped waiting for gratitude that would never come. I stopped feeding the illusion that I was anything more than a man filling in for a ghost. And in that silence, I found peace. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the pendant. The one I gave her at the rehearsal dinner, the one she mocked before the room went silent. I wonder where it is now, thrown in a drawer, left on a table, maybe sold for a fraction of what it meant to me. That small circle of silver was more than jewelry. It was 16 years carved into metal, a lifetime of sacrifice pressed into something she could carry with her. She laughed at it. That laugh was all the answer I ever needed. So here I sit, 50 years old, stripped of illusions but finally clear-eyed. I did not lose a daughter. I lost an obligation. I lost a chain that bound me to someone who never wanted me, except for what I could give. Madison will go on. She will rage. She will blame. She will tell her story to anyone who will listen. How her stepfather ruined her wedding. How he turned cold. How he abandoned her. And maybe people will believe her. Maybe they will pity her. But I know the truth. I know what it means to give everything and receive nothing. I know what it means to be invisible, indispensable, and discarded all at once. I know what it means to pour 16 years of your life into a well that never once echoes back gratitude. And I know this respect is not optional. Gratitude is not a luxury. Without them, love becomes slavery. I was a slave for 16 years. Now I am free. So I ask you, was I wrong? Was I cruel to finally cut the cord, to let her live in the truth she had spoken? Or was this the only way to end the illusion, to reclaim the pieces of myself I had given away? Tell me, if you were in my place, if you had carried another man's child for 16 years, only to be told you were nobody, what would you have done?